Have you ever been in such a good movie and you're by yourself, but it's so good you think, man, I got to bring my spouse to see this movie? Has anyone ever been there? Anyone? A few? Okay. So I was watching Wonder Woman in the theater by myself, and I remember thinking as I'm watching it, I've got to bring Melissa to see this. I really enjoyed it. I was like, Melissa, they made a movie about you. You got to come see it. It's great. Have you ever been in a place where you thought about someone else and you're like, man, they got to get over here. They got to see this. They got to be a part of it. They got to experience this. So as we start this, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You just answer them to yourself. Would you pick this up? Would you pick this up? All right. What about now? We'd probably pick that up if we knew it was a rope. What about this? Would you pick this up? What if you knew it was a caterpillar? I still probably would not pick that up, even if it was a caterpillar. What about this? Would you pick this up? What if you knew it was just a stick that looks like a snake? Now, if I told my boys, Joshua, Michael, David, you need to come here. I need you to pick that up. And all three of my boys looked, and this is what they saw. I said, look into this room. You need to pick that up. I want you to go over there and pick up that thing. They're going to have a hard time obeying me if this is what they see, right? They're going to have a really hard time obeying me. Dad, what do you want us to pick up? That, and I just point to it. That, right there. Go pick that up, right? But if they could see it clearly, I said, I want you to pick up those slippers. If they can see it, they can know what I mean. And if they know what I mean, they can obey me, right? But they have to know what I mean in order for them to actually obey me. If they could try to obey me, but if they don't know what I mean, it's going to be super hard. It's really hard to hit a target that you can't see. Really hard to hit a target you can't see. Now, there are all sorts of verses in the Bible that I don't see very well. And I'm on a journey trying to learn them and grow into knowing Jesus and seeing, how am I supposed to see this? How do I apply this? All right. One of the verses is the verses we're looking at today. It's a verse that I heard growing up. I've been in church my whole life. I was born on a pew, and I've been going to church ever since. And this is one of those verses that I've heard all the time, but when I actually stop to think about it, it's like, what does this even mean? Because this is what it looks like to me. How am I supposed to obey this when it looks like that? How am I going to obey this verse when it looks like that? This is the verse, Colossians chapter 3, verse 2. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. And so at the beginning of this week, I really just kind of sat down and I tried to think, okay, what does this actually mean? Really, Jesus, what does it mean? What does it mean to think about things above and not things of the earth? What does that actually mean? And so that's the question I want us to think about real quick in the short time that God is giving us right now. Set your mind on things above. What does that mean? Now, does that mean to set your mind on things above that you're constantly just thinking about heaven and angels and harps? First of all, is it wrong to think about heaven? It's not wrong, right? But is that what Jesus wants us to do? Constantly just be dreaming about heaven and what it will be like to the point where we disconnect from planet Earth. We disconnect from everything here. Imagine you get a knock on the door and they say, hey, you have not been paying your taxes for the last 10 years. And our response is, I don't have time for those earthly things. I got to think about heaven. I'm spiritual. I got to think about God all the time. I don't have time for taxes. The guy would then say, well, you can think about heaven all you want in prison, okay? Come with me. Great place to think about heaven, okay? And so does God want us to be so focused on heaven that we don't actually think about physical things, earthly things, temporary things down here? I don't think so. What about this idea of, okay, when we think about spiritual things, sometimes we think, oh, a spiritual person, they're so concerned about not sinning that they cut themselves off from all temptations, and they go to a place, they isolate themselves, they're protected. They're not around the unbelievers at all, because the unbelievers might influence them, so they go and they hide themselves in a little box. And that's a super spiritual person, because look, they distance themselves from all hints of sin. Problem with that is you got sin that you're working on within. No matter what cave you go to, no matter how far away you get from people, you still have sin to deal with from within, right? But as we talk about being a spiritual person, does a spiritual person isolate themselves from unbelievers and only surround themselves with believers? Is that what it means to really think about heavenly things all the time and not earthly things? Get away from earthly things. Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 says, "Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity." Which implies, as Christians following Jesus, we do not hide from the earth. We don't hide from unbelievers and outsiders. In fact, we interact with them. We are to be light and salt, influencing them, and we are to be wise in how we talk with them. Our words are to be full of grace and influence into other people's lives. So a spiritual person isn't hiding from the world. A spiritual person is influencing the world through Jesus Christ. C.S. Lewis writes, "The Christians who did the most for the present world were just those who thought most of the next. The apostles who set on foot the conversion of the Roman Empire, the great men who built up the Middle Ages, the English evangelicals who abolished slave trade, all left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven." To think on things above does not mean we disconnect from earth. To think on things above should influence how we handle earth, how we do this thing called life on planet earth. So what does it mean to set our mind on things above? We all live in this world where we have value systems. This is one of them. Our currency is a value system. It takes 5 pennies to make a nickel. It takes 2 nickels to make a dime. It takes 2 dimes and 1 nickel to make 25 cents, a quarter, right? This is a currency. This is a value system we all use, okay? We have all sorts of value systems. Like, this is a guy who's gotten tattoos on his legs. Now, would you want those tattoos? Probably not, because you don't have his value system. This was a drawing by his kid who he thought, I want that drawing by my kid on my legs permanently, okay? That was his value system. Now, we all have value systems that don't always match up with other people's value systems, which is why our refrigerators are full of artwork that other people would say, I would never hang that in my house. But you go ahead and hang it in your house, okay? I have all sorts of things in my room that have come from my boys that you would not want, because we don't have the same value system. They're very valuable to me, but they wouldn't necessarily be valuable to a stranger. All right, we have different value systems. Some people value running because they enjoy the process of running. This guy made the news a few years ago because in the middle of a marathon, someone just snaps his picture and he's smiling while everyone else is, grimacing. He is smiling. He enjoys running. Some people run because they enjoy it. That's their value system. Now, other people are not so photogenic, and they have a different value system. They might value running for different reasons. They might value it because they like competition. They might value running because they like health. In fact, they might not like running at all. They just like the benefits of running. They like having a healthy body, and so they run not because they enjoy the process, but they enjoy the results. So we have different value systems. Some people run because they don't want to be dinner, right? They don't want to be the bear's next meal, so they run for their lives. We have different value systems. So going back to the main verse, Colossians 3, verse 2, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Now, I set my mind to figure out, what does this actually mean? What does it mean, Jesus? And asking him, what does it mean to set our mind on things above? Now, here's a picture of a girl in a dress, and to the right is a quote given by her father to her. Her father says, I won't be coming to your graduation, nor will I pay for your college. Now, why would a father say that to his daughter? Here's another thing. her father said, "You're dead to me." What would make a father say, "You're dead to me," to his daughter? Well, this made headlines a couple years ago, and the headline says, "Dad tells daughter, 'You're dead to me,' for going to prom with a black man." Race is still an issue today. Racism. And it doesn't matter what race you are, you can be a racist. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, it doesn't matter. You can be a racist. And it's an issue still going on today. And what's going on here? He has a messed up value system. He says, "I'm better than this guy over here because he has the wrong skin color." That is a messed up value system. So, going back, what does it mean to set our mind on things above? Jesus, what does that really mean? And so as I thought about this question, I know that a lot of times answers come when you're asking Jesus and you're reading the verse that you have the question about in context. All right? A lot of times, answers, not all the time, but a lot of times, the answer you're looking for is in the context. And so I went for a run, and I listened to the book of Colossians. And I tried to listen to it like I was listening to it for the first time. And as I listened to it, I kept asking the question, what does it mean to set my mind on things above? What does it mean to set my mind on earthly things? What does the book of Colossians have to say about this? So I went on a run, I listened to the book of Colossians, and then I believe Jesus helped me understand what it actually means for me. And I'm going to share just some of them today. This verse started to illuminate things. Colossians 3, verse 11. "Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and in all." Question, is this a earthly value system? Is this an earthly value system, or is this a heavenly value system? Yeah. So as I was thinking about this question, what does it mean to set our minds on things above and not on earth? What started to become clear is this is all about a value system. To set our minds on things above is to grab hold of a value system that's in Christ and from Christ and for us. And to not set our minds on things, on earthly things, is to let go of a mindset, a value system that doesn't work and is wrong. So in Colossians 3, he says, race, that's not an issue in Christ. In Christ, Jesus doesn't look at your skin color. He looks right at your heart. So an earthly value system says your value comes from your race. Okay? A heavenly value system, one that comes from above, says value comes from Christ. Doesn't matter what your race is. You're valuable because Christ died for you. And he died for all races. Now, is it wrong to appreciate your heritage? To enjoy where you came from? Is it wrong? Yes or no? No. You might be proud of your heritage, but here's the truth. Every single race on planet Earth has baggage. Every single race has things we're proud of and things we wish we could kick under the rug of history. Say, I wish we didn't do that. I wish I wasn't a part of that. I wish I never read about that. Wish we never were guilty of that. Every race has things we're embarrassed of and things we're proud of, all right? Every race. Now, sometimes when we think about spiritual things and spiritual people, we think really super spiritual people are always like in this corporate worship mindset. They're always in this they're always worshiping things, you know? And we might think, using our logic, that someone who is so spiritual is someone who's always thinking about things to worship. Like, for instance, things that get closer and closer to where God is. Let's go ahead and worship those things because they're so close to God. I mean, what's some of the closest things to God? Angels. Angels, they go to and from, from earth to heaven, back and forth. They're around God. They get to see God. They're more powerful than humans. So why don't we worship angels? Because, man, they're spiritual beings. They're stronger than us. They help us out. And so using our physical intellect, We might come to some of those conclusions, but look what Paul says in Colossians chapter 2, verse 18. He's talking to Christians who struggled with this in the first century. Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. But they're so spiritual. Look, they're not only worshiping God, they're worshiping angels who were in heaven too. Isn't that amazing? Paul goes on to say, such a person also goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind. The very opposite. While we're thinking, oh, they're so spiritual, they pray to every angel out there. They know Gabriel, they know Michael, they know all these other ones. Paul says it's unspiritual. And in the context, he says they've lost connection with the head, which is Christ. Who deserves our worship? Jesus, not the creation. Now, in the book of Revelation, at the very end, John actually bows down to worship the angel that's giving him a revelation. And the angel quickly says, get up, I'm a fellow servant like you. Worship God. You want to know the difference between a good angel and a bad angel? A good angel will tell you, you worship Jesus, you do not worship me. You do not worship me, you worship him. That's a good angel. A bad angel will say, yeah, worship me, put me in gold, put me up on high places, worship me. I don't mind it at all. That's what a bad angel would do, is divert attention from the head, which is Christ, to divert attention from who really deserves it, who died for our sins, who purchased the church with his own blood. And so an earthly value system says, let's worship the creation. People are worshipers. Whether you go to church or not, we're always worshiping something. Whether you believe in God or not, humans are worshipers. We're worshiping something. And the earthly value system is worship the creation, and that includes angels. Angels are created beings. They didn't create us. God created them. A above value system says worship the Creator. And so that's why we worship Jesus. Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, in the context, is talking about Jesus. It says, for in him, Jesus, all things were created, things in earth and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things, that includes angels, all things have been created through him and for him. What's my purpose? Why do I exist? You were created by Jesus and for Jesus. Why am I here? He created you. What's my purpose? You're going to find it in Jesus. So we worship the Creator, not the creation. Here's another earthly value system. Whatever path leads to the results you want, go ahead and take. No matter what it takes to get to those results, you do it. If you have to lie, cheat, steal, do it. Because you want those results, don't you? That's an earthly value system, okay? It's one that people get caught up in, like Lance Armstrong. Well, everyone else is doing this, and if I want to win, if I want to be able to compete against these guys, I have to do it too. In sports, if other people are taking enhancements that are illegal, I better start doing it too if I want to win. That's not true. That's a lie. And the problem is when the lie is found out, you lose all those accolades. And if you could go back in time, you would tell yourself, don't do that. That value system, although it looks good right now, is not worth it in the end. Not when the truth is found out. That value system is from the earth, and it does not work. And so Colossians chapter 3, verse 9, Paul is talking to a church that still struggles with lying. And he says, do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices. They were lying to each other, and he says, this is weird to lie like this because you're part of the same body. So if sister so-and-so, every time you see her, she says, and you say, how are you doing? And she always says, I'm doing fine, doing good, yeah, doing good. And she goes home and she's miserable and she's sad and she starts complaining, no one ever visits me, no one ever cares about me. It's like, well, maybe it's because you're lying. When someone asks you, are you doing okay? Tell the truth. Now, I understand not everyone is trustworthy, and so you got to be careful, but there's got to be someone in the church that you can talk to, that you trust, that you can say, hey, I'm not doing so well. Would you pray with me? Would you visit me? And so do not lie. I mean, how weird would it be if my hand decided to lie to me? So I go to someone's house, their stove is on, I don't notice. I lean up against it, put my hand there, my hand's getting third-degree burns, but I don't know it, the brain doesn't know it, because the hand's lying. Hey, hand, is everything okay? Hand says, oh yeah, perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Not hurting over here. What is that, bacon? Like, what? Our hand lying to us does not help the body. We have to learn to talk to each other and really, really let each other know, how are we doing? What's going on? Can I help you? Can you help me? So earthly mindset, do whatever it takes to get the results you want. If you have to lie, cheat, steal, do it. The mindset, the value system from above, okay, is character has to be the thing that drives the results. Character has to be the thing that drives the results. If you think about the cross, the only reason why the cross worked is because character drove those results. If Jesus had sinned one time before he got to the cross would have failed. God needed a perfect sacrifice, one from someone who never ever sinned, which was Jesus. If Jesus took the earthly value system and said, I'm going to kind of lie to get to the cross, it would have been an issue. So the question today is, what will you use to direct your value system? What will be the source of your value system? Because we all have value systems, but what's going to be the source of it? What is going to drive it? I want to just share a few questions and then one last thought. What's more important, being a preacher or being a Christian? Being a Christian. I'm a Christian first. I happen to be a Christian preacher. What's more important, being a Walmart employee or a Christian? I'm a Christian who happens to work at Walmart. What's more important, being a father or being a Christian? I'm a Christian who happens to be a father. I'm a Christian who happens to have this race. I'm a Christian who happens to be in America, having this nationality. I'm a Christian who happens to be a husband. But we have to get the first things first. We have to understand that we are first Christians who happen to be Americans and not get things messed up, putting the other things above Christ. The most important thing is our relationship to him. We're Christian first, and everything else now flows from being tied to Jesus. That's the value system from above. When we get the other things, we put them above Christ, we've messed up the value system. So going back, Colossians chapter 3, verse 2, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. So I want to leave you with this thought. Why did Jesus come to earth? To save us. At some point, while he is in heaven, he set his mind on things above, and while he thought of things above, he saw you. Amen. While Jesus himself was in heaven before he came to earth, he thought of things above and said, I'd really like for them, for you, for me, to be with him. He wanted us to go see Wonder Woman. He wanted us to experience what he experiences. He wanted us to be with him. And because he thought of us while he thought of things above, he came to earth to make a way for us to be with him. That's the God we worship. Let's stand and let's worship him right now.